the plan when the regional plan goes for revision.
Let's go to Susan.
Repeat your question.
So I'm thinking that beyond fixing some irregularities in the land use, including the marking of eco-sensitive zones, arbitrary increases of settlement zones to benefit few powerful people, I think all of us sitting on the dais today agree that the plan should have more than just the land use component. It should have some policies and some systems in place to prevent additional harms on the people of Goa. My question to everyone here is if they can think of like one that they would push for on priority that could safeguard the people who are currently residing here.
In this direction, I would like to give example of existing two laws. Both are beneficiary legislation, what we say, that is Tenancy Act and Munkaria Act. These are by and large beneficiary legislation, that is, you are giving a benefit to a person who is not rightfully the owner of that land. So these are beneficiary legislation. Right now, government is trying to bring in laws similar to this type of things. For example, like Alwara land. Alwara land, they are saying that class 2 will remain as agricultural land, but class 1, when you convert that Alwara land to class 1, the buyer can sell it off. Alwara land doesn't belong to that buyer first and foremost. So it falls into the category of beneficiary legislation. If you are at all giving it to third person, ensure that for whatever purpose you are giving it to him, it remains for that purpose, and if he is willing to give it to some third person, you have to reclaim that land back. We are sooner than later, by virtue of this High Court order, and even the assembly session, government will try to bring in some bills which will be going into the domain of beneficiary legislation without adequate checks and balances. If benefit is for an individual landowner or individual residential premises, someone has constructed a house on some property that doesn't belong to him. Government is proposing to get a legislation saying that we are regularizing the houses on Kamnidat land. That is what they are trying. Even though Kamnidat are opposing to it, fairly correctly they are doing it. But if at all this legislation becomes a reality, then what are the checks and balances? Because in many of the Kamnidat land, tenanted agricultural land, people have constructed and let out their residential premises. And they are actually operating it as a commercial premises by letting it out and earning on monthly basis on rent, through rents. So this is actually going beyond what is actually required by that individual. If it is limited to his individual dwelling, then yes, protection has to be inserted, and that is what is required, or otherwise you will start getting commercialization of this beneficiary legislation. In Munkaria Act, you cannot sell off that land, that house of yours. It will remain within your family. That is what a protection should talk about. Even in agricultural tenancy, if you was or now a tenant of a land, you cannot change the land use of that land. That is what the law says. So this type of protection is what is required when you are going ahead with a beneficiary legislation related to land. This is what my opinion is.
It's a difficult one, just one policy. Yes, I think what you put up first, the eco-sensitive areas should not be touched at all. Has to be supplemented, and what by a definition of eco-sensitive land, not just eco but also socially sensitive land. Lands that are sensitive for sustainable economies, traditional economies. And I would think that that should include all the plateaus 100%, all the rivers, all our commons, river fronts, whatever, and all the wooded areas, irrespective of whether they are declared forests or not. If, like you rightly said, I think that's a policy, but an alternate one would be, policy that all policies will be decided by the people. I think that would also do.
With the spoken word and the written word compromised in India, I think the mapped word is still available, so we should not lose hope. And my suggestion is any plan is better than no plan at all. That's the first thing. At the level of panchayats, several of us attend the meetings, which maybe once a month, whatever. What happens there, they discuss, they fight, and they go away. I personally think if it's a small change, if you have the panchayat level plan with you, what you call the ward level plan, there will be a sea change in the discussions. I'm speaking from experience because we tried it out in Delhi, we tried it out in Calcutta. If it happens in these two places, it can happen anywhere else, and certainly in Goa. The discussions will get more meaningful. Well, that's the main thing I have to say. Second thing is, keep things simple. The plan should be simple. First, when we have these 3 levels of plan, what is important? You have a correct map at the right scale. Don't put anything superfluous for the planners, etc. For example, once when I was doing a plan in my student days, by underlining the heading, it looked good. And the teacher asked me, why are you underlining? Because on a statutory plan, underlining means for something. You see, so better be careful. Every line, everything means something. So one thing is, have your plan, have simplified development, control, regulations, and what are the uses allowed and disallowed. These are the only 3 things which you have to tell the people. In the sense, you do all the studies, get all the experts you want, but ultimately end up with this very clearly. As a result of all that, this is what we want discussed. It is a simplification process. And I say this because simplification of development control regulations, are separate from bylaws, has been tried out internationally. And I myself had to do this through the UN in Jamaica, and it worked very well. That simplification. The powers that be said, this is exactly what we want. Don't complicate it. The Delhi Master Plan in its development control had 5-6 pages. We simplified it. And the Secretary of the Department said, this is what I want here. Simplify it, keep it very clear, and I can adopt it elsewhere. The whole thing is, how do you curtail corruption? The argument is you can't finish off corruption, but you can reduce it. And I think these are the things which I would like to share with this forum. And I think it will be useful if all of you will go back and try and see how these plans could be enforced. There are efforts being made to see the plans are not brought in place. I can tell you that. Yeah, the plans are available. When I went to my panchayat first time, he showed me a plan. I said, this is the plan which we prepared during our draft regional plan. I didn't want to see it, I want to see the other. He didn't have it. And then, so the best thing is to get that enforced. Yeah. And one way of doing it, I think Elsa, who's sitting here, has tried it. she got her students, you asked them a question, which village do you come from? Okay, next time you try and get your geographical area of your plan, get that plan, and then try and see if we can force it. And I think these are very good things to try. Thank you.
Hello. So I want to I have something like exactly what Abhijit was was saying, which is that I think we need to, plants typically do not have environment as a starting point, and they don't have water as a starting point. So if these are not your basis, the basis is how do you increase developable lands, or can we mark more lands for development? So I think planning inherently is looking at when it's mapping land uses, it's trying to open up lands for development. That's kind of inherent to that plan making activity. And so its starting point is not how do we, not from a point of how kind of an environmental perspective itself is absent. I think that it is not the starting point ever. And so given that, I would say that in today's context, with climate change upon us, if we can make disaster risk resilience or climate resilience as central, all of this will get folded into that. And water and environment, go hand in hand. It could even be water as the core. Securing water will mean securing everything.
Thank you. First of all, it's good to come last after the likes of MS Dhoni and the greats. So pressure is not. But I can't agree more with what Malini is saying, and this is not by great insight. I happen to be engaged in a project on the Madhe, which has culminated. But one thing that struck me as a person obsessed with looking at land use is that already even in India, there's been a shift to recognize that the smallest unit of planning is the micro watershed. It is, and what this means is it's the natural way over centuries, over millennia, water and nature has evolved to develop its own style, has developed, it's a kind of learning that has happened over time naturally. Water flows in its own logic, has its own way. Nature has an intelligence of its own. So the thinking now has emerged, and India is a signatory to this. That's why we were supposed to have integrated watershed management plans, where the smallest unit of all plans should be that watershed that nature itself has developed. And we should scale up from there. So that should be the smallest unit. So I completely mirror what she's saying. So imagine if we could, so my proposal is, could we imagine a new way, a new starting point that looks at these ecological units as the building blocks from which we go up, The other plan is a more social plan, is to imagine if it is possible for us to create a pool of housing. We have, as was already mentioned, we are the second home capital of India. It's an ironic situation where we have massive unoccupied housing stock. At the same time, housing is unaffordable for ordinary people. So could we think of a pool where it's not ownership, it's rental perhaps? Or in a similar way, could we imagine agriculture having a kind of a lease ownership, so that these livelihood and a home over your head is a guarantee, at least for the smallest denominator in the population?
Anybody's thought of any questions, you can put up your hand and we'll continue.
I had a question for Dr. Malini. I love the way that you created the plan for CPM, and given the context of it being a small town as you defined it, I was just wondering if you've seen any challenges in scaling that model to, say, a larger geographic area, perhaps within the state of Goa.
So I've been asked the scalability question, and I think So the way I look at it, I think what that plan tells you is that what needs to be taken on board, and it kind of synthesizes things that I have felt planning does not take on board. So planning does not start with water, planning doesn't recognize urban commons and all of that. Planning does not reach out to people to start with, like it starts with land use, you know. So I think that to me, I felt like Chittoor is half a ward of Mumbai. It's not impossible to have these conversations at that local level. It's possible, but we've not ever thought of having those conversations. And usually in large cities, people are so disconnected anyway. They are so powerless, they feel that they can't have those conversations. So for me, I felt that Chittoor tells me that this is possible if planners start thinking that you have to engage with people, and that the knowledge is that the expert is the expert is only a facilitator. It's a new hat that we have to learn to put on, to recognize that we don't understand the local, that our entire the knowledge that, our entire training is to think that we know, but in reality we know so little. That I think if we are able to say we only know this process, that, this technical representation, like we have ways of knowing how to create that larger plan, but if we find a way, to tap into that local knowledge and bring it into the plan. So I think, to me, I was very heartened that we could do this, and to me it feels that you can scale up. It starts with a word, start with anything that you have control over. And that's why I also felt the way money flows in India, it's through projects. So even if you have a really good project that you can get everybody on board and you all want a good walkable street or a good something, you can mobilize and make that happen. Like, it feels like it's possible to do this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening to the panelists. My question is simple. I have derived the concept from coastal management, not in India, the integrated coastal management in Europe. And what I have noticed in today's session is that fragmentation is a major problem. As it was also said that there are 4 ministries dealing with land issues. So is there a need for integrated planning, so TCP? So in coastal zone, what happens is you have your Goa Coastal Zone Management, you have your TCP, you have your panchayats and municipalities all deciding on same concepts. Which similar thing is happening in the planning, as I can see. So my question to the panelist is, do we require or can we advocate for an integrated planning or integrated management? Side note, I also see that fragmentation is a benefit because, as Dr. Malini said, again my perception, they were able to develop the towns, the town only because it was fragmented because Kerala does not have a uniform planning system. That is why they could work on, that's my understanding, on that area. So so now I'm conflicted. Is integrated better or fragmented better?
Try to answer this with something that Edgar told me around 10 years ago. When I was interested in getting into planning, Edgar said, what planners have lost along the way is that you are the one who's responsible to put everything in one place. And when I worked as a planner in America, that is what I was doing. A proposal would come, I would direct it, it always came to planning. We would pass the file to everybody who had some stake or some concern, be it a different department, be it a group of citizens, send someone to knock on doors and tell them that this proposal to revise the plan is going to affect these things in your neighborhood. ask the water resources department, ask the forest department, but everything would go through the planning department because the plan, and Malini can vouch for this as well. One thing I feel you learn in planning school is how you don't learn a lot of technical skills besides mapping, but you learn how to facilitate things, how to move things. And so I am, like Vaibhav said, I'm an advocate of it's not exactly integrating in the form of centralizing, but it's keeping giving the planner and the planning department the responsibility for ensuring that every possible compliance is done. Because the buck has to stop at someone. And according to me, the only department that is trained to understand the limits of it, be trained to be a generalist, as my professor Scott Campbell says, planning is the last great generalist profession. And I think the only profession where someone is trained to be a generalist is planning. Because you're a master of nothing. And so that planner should be given the responsibility to ensure that all the masters in all the other departments, be it community, be it indigenous people, be it experts of geology, be it university experts, everybody's points are agglomerated and then finally put to the public. This is how I see it. But I don't know if the Kerala example is very different.
Yeah, so just to clarify,